So for this discussion, we posed a rhetorical question. Did you know MPAs work? I think everybody in this room knows the answer to that question. And to a large extent, it's how we prove what we know. So before I introduce anybody who's going to talk about the issue, I want to introduce two reports that are being released today for Capitol Hill Ocean Week that answer that question in two key ways. The first report has been as a display copy on the table all week, and as of today, you can find it online. It's the National Marine Sanctuary System National Condition Report for 2013. And I encourage all of you to look at the display copy and to go online, sanctuaries.noaa.gov, and check it out. It will give you very detailed information on how the sanctuary system is doing with respect to the resources that they are mandated to protect under the law. Speaking of the law, the second report that we are releasing today, and hard copies of the executive summary are literally hot off the press, and we're talking traditional presses now, and they'll be on the table, and it is area-based management of marine resources. It's a legal review that has been that's been prepared over the last several months and is being published by the Sea Grant National Law Center. I want to read what I consider to be the most important line of the 80-page report. The National Marine Sanctuaries Act is the most effective and comprehensive approach currently available to protect specific areas within coastal and ocean zones, including entire marine ecosystems, and the statute is the only existing federal law structured with this end firmly in mind. National Marine Sanctuaries Act is the only law on the books enacted by Congress, signed by the President, structured for comprehensive ocean place-based governance. And you will hear that from the two members of Congress who are here with us this morning, our two co-chairs of the National Marine Sanctuary Caucus, and you'll hear it from the panelists themselves. And it is my great honor to introduce the first of the co-chairs, Dr. Dan Benishik, congressman from northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, where he was a practicing doctor, a general surgeon, since 1983. He's an avid hunter and fisherman, and so knows the value of multi-use sites within our National Marine Sanctuary system. Congressman Benishik was elected to Congress in 2010, and he's a great supporter of Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And as we heard yesterday from the superintendent and this morning from the senator representing the state, we know how important and how beautiful Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary is. And so it's my great pleasure to invite Congressman Benishik to this podium. Hey, thank you.
Well, it's a great crowd, and I want to thank the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation for inviting me to be part of the Capitol Hill Ocean Week, as well as for sponsoring this event. I want to thank the NMSF CEO, Jason, for working so hard on this great event, as well as the panelists, Fred, Greeley, Jerry Alt, and Michael Cohen, as well as all of you for being with us here today. I want to thank my colleague, Congresswoman Capps, for being the co-chair of the National Marine Caucus. As you know, I represent Michigan's 1st district, and I like to think of it as the most beautiful part of the state. I represent the northern half of Michigan, 28,000 square miles. I have the more lakefront or more waterfront than any other district in the country, other than the state of Alaska, which is one district. And we border on 3 Great Lakes, and well, it's just gorgeous. So I encourage you all to come up and visit it. You may have seen a little Pure Michigan ad, and trust me, it doesn't do my area justice. And I was just back home last week, and I get to spend 3 days on Mackinac Island, which is like the jewel of northern Michigan, nestled in the straits between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. And let me tell you, it is absolutely gorgeous. Michigan is the home of the only freshwater national marine sanctuary in the country. The Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary and the Great Lakes Maritime Heritage Center in Alpena serve as a major tourist destination in northern Michigan. We have over 80,000 visitors each year. Thunder Bay is dedicated in the year 2000, and there's other maritime heritage resources in the area. The center serves as a hub for Great Lakes research and also for STEM education. They have, under the high school kids make these underwater rovers that actually serve as research vessels in the area. Thunder Bay has made a significant impact on both the local and the regional economy and is widely supported by the community. The local community recently came together to rebrand the entire area based on tourism, business recruitment, and other economic development initiatives centered over the sanctuary. The brand Alpena, Sanctuary of the Great Lakes, is built around Noah's work in the community. In fact, as Alpena rebrands itself around the sanctuary, Thunder Bay is undergoing an expansion of its boundaries that will include more wrecks and historical areas in the sanctuary. This is widely supported in the community. An editorial in our local newspaper by a local diver may have said it best, and we quote him, "Divers are indeed happy with the situation. You have access not just to the wreck, but you have sound history and research on a web page. It's just a fantastic way to explore wrecks 24/7, and he doesn't have to decompress while I'm doing it." Simply put, Thunder Bay is one of the best things to happen in our region in the last 20 years. I'd like to thank everyone here who's attending and taking the time out of their day to learn more about our marine protected areas. And as you know, I'm a great supporter of Thunder Bay and the National Marine Sanctuary System, and it's really been my pleasure to be part of it. Touring the facility they have on shore, and then the glass bottom boats where you can actually go out and see the wrecks is, unbelievably great day. And, just to be interacting with the tourists that we encountered there was just fabulous. And the long-term preservation of this area is just a wonderful project for our district, and just happy to be part of it. Please feel free to communicate with me in any way that you like to, further projects in your area or learn more about our beautiful sanctuary in northern Michigan. With that, we'll allow our host to introduce my co-chair.
So thank you, Congressman. Now it's my great honor to introduce the other co-chair of the National Marine Sanctuary Caucus, Congresswoman Lois Capps, who represents the 23rd District in California. Now, Congresswoman Capps is a longtime fixture here at Capitol Hill Ocean Week, and I'm delighted to say that in 2010, Congresswoman Capps was the recipient of the Foundation's Leadership Award during our very special 10th anniversary event. And so Congresswoman Capps has been a longtime champion of not only the National Marine Sanctuary System, but also of our oceans generally. I think we all know her as being one of the most outspoken champions against offshore oil and gas drilling along the California coast. She's been a big supporter of education, and in particular marine education, and NOAA's BWET program. And she's got two sanctuaries within her own district, Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary and the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So Congresswoman Capps really needs no introduction from me, and I'm delighted to welcome her up. Hey, thank you.
And as Dan Basta just reminded me, we dedicated the Shearwater, the exploratory, the NOAA vessel that does so much fabulous research for our Channel Islands. We love it, and it's an example of what the sanctuary partnerships can do. So I'm really delighted to be here with my co-chair. We have a wonderful sanctuary caucus because of the very special areas around the country, and those of us who represent them take very seriously the opportunities and the responsibilities as well. And we are enhanced by the work of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So thank you for being here for that, but also Capitol Hill Oceans Week. You had a fabulous dinner the other night I was able to attend. And I'm here noticing that the Volunteer of the Year, I just have to give him a shout out. Paul Petrick is from our congressional district. And to me, that's always a highlight of the week and the dinner, to really signal out someone who, as Paul taught school for a number of years, retired, well, a very youthful retiree, I must say, and now has just given hundreds and hundreds of volunteer hours at our state beaches along the Santa Barbara coastline, because they border the sanctuary. So it gives him an opportunity to educate campers who would never know this jewel that's right offshore if it weren't for the wonderful work that Paul does, and he's gotten other volunteers to participate in that as well. So this is contagious, isn't it? And I'm delighted that he was able to be signaled out to be Volunteer of the Year this year. Marine protected areas are so important for our coastal ecosystems and also our economies. As my co-chair was saying, this is really a very big boost, and the panel is going to be discussing that this morning. Is it morning or afternoon? I'm not even sure. We depend on the oceans for so many things, for seafood, for recreation, for cultural use. It's such a big part of our economy, but also for our, what's the word for pleasure, spiritual enhancement. It's part of our life. It's the marine lore, it's the cultural benefits, it's all of the things that enhance the particular areas that are fortunate enough to be on a coastline with a sanctuary. And we want to make sure that the resources that are there are protected for the future, which is what the marine protected areas can do. And that's why I'm also a longtime supporter of the National Marine Sanctuaries, and I've co-chaired them. We started the Sanctuary Caucus, Eliana Ross-Leighton and I. She no longer represents coastal areas, but there are a number of others of us who do, knowing that we need to be distinctively mindful of the benefits of the sanctuaries. We, all of us who are part of the Sanctuary Caucus, represent districts with abundant marine resources, supporting so many local livelihoods and industries. Our Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary is a critical contributor in our area to jobs and to businesses. Michael Cohen is going to talk to you about that. Among his many activities, his company launches kayak tours from Channel Island shore. His service allows visitors to experience the sanctuary's unique sea caves, marine life, coastal wilderness. He's needed, his industry is needed, so tourists can have an opportunity to really learn. And of course, then it creates a business for him and the people who work with him. The sanctuary helps ensure that these visitors have beautiful things to see on their tours because it's protected. And this is just one of the many businesses that benefit from the Channel Islands Sanctuary. And you multiply that by all the sanctuaries, you realize how important this is. All told, the sanctuary supports at least, this is ours, our sanctuary, at least 3,000 jobs and generates more than $200 million in economic activity every year. That's not small change. A similar story could be told about the MPAs implemented by California's Marine Life Protection Act. The Central Coast MPAs recently underwent their 5-year review, and the results are encouraging. We're already seeing increased size and abundance of key fish species inside the MPAs. And of course, that means that the fisher folk outside the areas will also benefit, because those fish don't just stay in the MPAs. This is going to help ensure that our coastal economies continue to thrive. And that's why we'll always be a champion for protecting and properly managing. It's really about management. It's about shared and diverse use of this very important resource, that we do this with careful planning so that we keep the resources plentiful for our generation, but also for future generations. The benefits are both economic and environmental. And working with you working with us in the Congress is a win-win for all, keeping with the goal of keeping our oceans healthy and productive. So it's going to be a good panel. I'm delighted that we have this opportunity that this week is finishing up with a grand finale, right? So thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
So I want to thank our two co-chairs again. The caucus is as strong as it's ever been, and it's thanks to the leadership of Congressman Benishek and Congresswoman Capps. So it's now a great honor to introduce the moderator of the next panel, Mr. Fred Keely. Now, many of you in California know Mr. Keely very well. He's been in the California Assembly for a lot of years before he moved to become the Santa Cruz treasurer, that is of the county. While Fred was in the California General Assembly, he was responsible for authoring the Marine Life Management Act, which was the precursor to the Marine Life Protection Act. Fred was the lead co-author of that law, and that law has spurred not only California but the nation to think about how states with coasts and ocean need to manage their waters. Also, while he was in the California Assembly, Fred was responsible for the two largest environmental and park bonds in the nation, not just in California, but in the nation, totaling more than $5 billion between the two of them. During his time there, he served as Speaker pro tempore of the Assembly as well. I will say this about Fred. He is one of the trustees of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, but as treasurer of Santa Cruz County, he is also the head tax collector. Now, we all know that the IRS has been in the news recently, but one thing you need to know about Fred, when you walk with Fred through the streets of Santa Cruz, you have people cross the street to come and shake hands and say hi to him. Go find any other individual in the country who has the responsibility of collecting your taxes and is still sought after and desired to be talked to across the entire region. Really, everybody loves Fred, including me at the foundation, and so it's a great honor to bring him up to the, you going to talk from here or are you going to talk from there? So it's my great honor to turn the mic over to Fred now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason, and thanks to the members of Congress who preceded us in this panel today and the other members of Congress and the United States Senate who've blessed us with their presence during Capitol Hill Ocean Week. It is indeed a critical component part of the work of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation to be able to have the support, encouragement, participation, and relationships with members of Congress, both in the Senate and the House of Representatives. What I want to do today to start this off is use a little bit of a California-centric view of the world, because those of you not from California would know that you despise us among other reasons because we do view ourselves as the center of the universe.
It's true.
It is true.
Yeah, that's right.
California, compared to the East Coast, we got to the game late. We got into the Union in 1850, and one of the very first parts of our state government, and it was in the California state constitution and still is the establishment of the Fish and Game Commission. I would ask you to look at your own state constitution and see if you can find a commission in your state constitution. My guess is you're not going to find too many states that have that. The reason for that in California is that because we are 1,100 miles long and a couple of hundred miles wide, we have an awful lot of fish and game that we value and place a priority on that. However, when we first became a state, we were essentially rural, agricultural, sparsely populated. So the challenge from a resource management perspective was, how do you manage abundance? And the answer to that question is, you don't manage much at all. And in fact, the bedrock foundation of the law was, you can't manage much unless you can prove that there is a crisis in that public policy area. Forward yourself to the late 1990s, and the world changed completely from the 1850s. Instead of being rural, sparsely populated, basically agricultural, California has 36.5 million people. 70% of those folks live within approximately a 1-hour drive of the coast, and they place enormous pressure on fish and wildlife throughout the state, but certainly within the coastal environment. And the challenge was no longer how do you manage abundance, it's how do you manage scarcity. So the law needed to completely change. And instead of essentially prohibiting proactive work in that space, it needed to pivot to recognize the reality that you need to proactively manage in that space. That gave rise to the Marine Life Management Act, Marine Life Protection Act. Those were an initial way of looking at tools in the toolbox for actively managing scarcity and trying to reverse that. And as the gentleman who's here with us from Santa Barbara, who was the Volunteer of the Year, mentioned at the CHOW dinner the other night, his father and his grandfather saw those changes from abundance to scarcity. He saw it as a child and as a school teacher and as a volunteer. So what we want to examine today is in that environment of relative scarcity and the trends from abundance to scarcity. We understand the science fairly well, but there is if you will, a value dynamic that comes into conflict. And that is that when government proposes a sanctuary, when government proposes a marine protected area or a chain of them, almost always what happens is the science is pretty darn good. The politics get pretty tough in a hurry because when the proposal is made, there is a feeling on the part of many of the stakeholders, largely outside of the scientific community, that what's being attempted is somebody is trying to take your livelihood away, your history away, your culture away, and replace it with something else. So we're going to go into that in some depth this morning, try to explore how that works in Florida, how that works in California. And we're really blessed this morning to have a couple of folks who know way more than a little bit about that. We're going to start, we have Jerry Alt, who is at the University of Miami, an internationally recognized expert in the marine sciences across the board, has an extensive CV in terms of his publications, has been and continues to be very high profile in taking science into the world on NBC News, on CBS News, on CNN, National Geographic Channel, a wide variety of places to push out how to discuss science in a way, not by dumbing it down, by intelligently presenting it so that folks can engage in the science and therefore understand how these protections, whether they are sanctuaries or MPAs, how those can really be made to work effectively. Jerry Alt, a pleasure to have you here. Welcome, and we would enjoy hearing some initial remarks from you.
Great, thank you, Fred. With due respect to Fred, though, I'd like to shift the center of the universe from California to the Florida Keys for a good reason. It really is the centroid of, well, certainly the living coral reef of America in the continental area. It's the third largest barrier reef in the world. It's a confluence of physics, atmosphere, ocean circulation, biology that's unmatched. It's a situation that the state legislature has called Florida fishing capital of the world, and the Florida Keys are literally the center of that. Numerous world records are from there. In fact, about 80% of the world records for tarpon bone fish and permit come from the Florida Keys and the sanctuary area. So it's a renowned area, and since we're talking about economics, I thought I would run some of those numbers by you. Florida operates on an $8.5 billion a year recreational fishing industry, of which the center of that is organized in South Florida. If you add in the $1.5 billion that come from both ex-vessel value, et cetera, from commercial fishing, it means that fishing to Florida is about a $10 billion a year industry, making it more valuable in today's economics than the citrus industry. That's a big statement to say that it's a growing industry. If you roll that into the Gulf and recognizing that it services a much broader area, the fishing industry in the Gulf, rec fishing, is about a $48 billion industry, generates about 300,000 jobs, of which 80,000 of those are in Florida. So it's majorly focused on industry, economics, and people. But it's also home to hundreds of commercial and recreational species and a large number of threatened and endangered fish and corals. So it's a complex that needs protection. The area itself is experiencing really unforeseen growth in humans. There's about 20 million folks in the state right now. Doubling time is about 18 years. We have 1 million registered recreational vessels in the state. Again, the bulk of those are in South Florida. Doubling time there is 13 years based on disposable cash. So the threats are there. The change is there. When we look at the issues that are associated with it, the analyses that we've done that actually help stimulate implementation of the sanctuary and the no-take marine protected areas, and that's really what I'm going to focus on, is that when we look at the snapper grouper complex, about 75 species, 70% of that complex is below the population levels that are considered sustainable under state, federal, and international fishery management perspectives. So there's major threats. That process, if you will, the context of sustainability, I would liken to an economic argument, and it's much like your bank account or your investment accounts. If I have no principal, I'm going to get no interest. The threshold that we use this spawning potential ratio, so it's a measure of what the stock size was prior to exploitation and what it is at present. A 30% target is basically an overfish state. Some of the resources in the Florida Keys are at 1% of the historical abundance. So significant problems for a situation that supports an enormous industry. So there was pushback initially with the implementation of the reserves from folks just saying, oh, everything's okay, you know, it's sunny, you just don't understand that. Mostly that was a very short time frame that they'd spent within the waters, et cetera. Beautiful place, and a tear came to my eye when the journalists were saying they'd never see a coral reef. They need to go see a coral reef. It's an amazing environment. And the beauty of that is it's not all fishing. There's this aesthetic part of diving, and what makes a diving experience exceptional is to have a lot of fish on that reef. I mean, the coral reef is nice, but a lot of fish there make it exceptional. Case, and some of these fishes, like the Goliath grouper, 800-pound grouper up next to you is a pretty enlightening state of mind. So I'd say, and I'm saying this in a very interesting way. There was an intelligent design. It wasn't necessarily a message from God, but the process of implementing that sanctuary was a very smart process that involved all the stakeholders that were in the process, that were of concern. It also included an incredible database that reflected a pre-implementation activity that went through a series of discussions between NOAA and the National Park Service, who both had interest in protection areas there. And that design came up with an optimal configuration, basically that coupled the physical oceanography of the region, the circulation and transport, which was critical based on the upstream position of many of these sanctuaries. And it dealt also with this cross-shelf ontogeny of animals that linked habitats together that were required to maximize the productivity. It produced projections of expectation for results that the public was aware of up front, of what it was going to be and what the forecast was. Well, it also had as a backbone one of the largest, longest, most specious, most precise surveys of reef environments on the planet. That was started in 1979. So we had an incredible data system that was available. The good news is that that system that looked at occupancy, abundance, and size structure paid off in a big way. And the big way was that we got response within the reserves that exceeded what theoretical projections were. When we implemented, for example, the Tortugas area, it was expected about 6 to 7 years to start getting payoff in the area. 3 years after implementation, we were seeing abundances doubling, tripling, et cetera, within that protected area. Very important. It also serves as the lifeblood to the regional fisheries. Don't think of it as a myopic thing. Given the physical transport in that area, it's servicing both the Gulf of Mexico with transport up the West Florida shelf, in fact, all the way to Louisiana, where our friends are, and in fact, up the South Atlantic bight to the Carolinas. So it's a very important resource in that regard. It also, within the protected areas at present, within the survey domain of the Keys, of the 22% of this area, which is the Tortugas, that now holds 35 to 50% of the spawning biomass for red grouper, black grouper, mutton snapper, and yellowtail snapper. Why is that important? They constitute 60% of the commercial fishery catch in the state of Florida. So the reserve is working in a very big way, and I think our findings indicate that no-take marine reserves, when properly planned and when properly executed, can not only service the function of what the sanctuary was set up for, but in fact have a much stronger impact on the regional ecology and economics. So thank you.
Jerry, thank you very much. Good presentation. my pleasure now to introduce to you Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is the owner and operator since 1998 of Santa Barbara Adventure Company in the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary area. And Michael is someone who, as I view it, is an educator. He's an entrepreneur. He's putting his money at risk. And what we get out of that, it seems to me, is every person who goes out there with him in any way, shape, or form is able to go out there one way and come back educated, informed, inspired, and enthused. And so it's a real pleasure to have Michael Cohen with us. Michael, good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Good.
I'm the small business outfitter they brought out to tell the world about how the sanctuaries are actually beneficial. And I have to say, I think that people come with us. We do a variety of trips. We do kayaking, trips to the Channel Islands National Park. I'm wondering, can AV guys run the slides of the sanctuary out there? You can see some of my groups. We try to really affect people in a positive way to make a educational change in them. It's almost like covert environmentalism. We always figure if we can get them to love the experience, they will come back and try to make good choices overall in the way they vote, in the way they spend, in the way they follow nature. This little clip we're showing you right now is a group at Refugio State Beach, Pat, and that is just adjacent to the sanctuary, the coastal protected area, just north. And we have a group of 50 kids from San Francisco who are 10th graders doing an outdoor education program. And here, one of my guides puts his GoPro camera underneath the water and captures three migrating gray whales coming through this group of about 50 school children. Well, you can imagine these people were freaking out when these, I mean, here's some of these breaching whales, then literally swimming underneath them. The visibility, that's a mother and two calves swimming underneath their kayak right now. And so you can have a profound impact on people if you can show them these experiences. And here he is popping up. He didn't quite get the kids screaming at the top of their lungs, and then back down he goes. So a really amazing experience that can only happen with the investment in our sanctuaries, in our national parks, and all our best ideas are these protected areas. And I think you folks are all aware of that and advocates, and if we can keep that voice going back to the people on Capitol Hill, that we need to do a little bit more to keep protecting those. Channel Islands National Park offers sea cave kayaking to people. About 6,000 people a year just come on our sea cave kayaking tours, and we're able to take them to places they couldn't go safely. They might be able to do it on do it on their own, but we like to think of it as it's a religious experience. So when they come back, they're really touched by this incredible protected area. And now with the advent of social media, they're writing it up on Facebook and Twitter and all of these things as the highlight of their experience, the highlight of their vacation. Santa Barbara County will one-up you. Santa Barbara County alone generates $1.4 billion in tourism money. We provide over 30,000 jobs, and the sanctuary itself is a huge driver of that. We have a scenic beauty that is just magnetic, and it's making people come to the region just to see this. If we can't help protect it with these coastal reserves, with these marine areas, then, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Let's protect our resources. So it's great to be here. Thank you very much. Lois Capps lives just up the street from me. Her house is much nicer than mine, but I'm still happy to be here.
Michael, thank you. Well, in the interest of stimulating more competition between East Coast and the left coast, a couple things I want to mention. Jason, in his introduction, mentioned that there's a couple of publications out quite recently. One that's out today is the Area-Based Management of Marine Resources, and the other one is the National Marine Sanctuary System Condition Report 2013. Out on the left coast, we also, the California Ocean Science Trust, which is the entity charged by law in California with establishing a monitoring enterprise for the marine protected areas. They put out a report earlier this year, which is results of the baseline monitoring of marine protected areas 2007 to 2012. I think what's interesting about all of these is the following, that you look at these and there is very good information about the science, which there should be. There is perhaps quite a bit less information about essentially the economics. And I want to set this question to you. As I mentioned earlier, there's almost inevitably a dynamic tension when marine protected areas or sanctuaries are being suggested. When you talk to Dan Basta and others about the notion of being able to look at both the expansion in size and numbers of sanctuaries as our nation continues to move in that direction of thoughtful management of our marine resources, we know that what happens is that we find ourselves with an initial reaction from many folks who say, you know what's really going on here is government is trying to take my business, my livelihood, my culture, my way of life away from me. Right. And that is almost always that tense starting point. We get science afterwards, before and afterwards, which says that's not what we're intending and that's not what's happening. But you can argue with people about anything you want to argue with them about except their feelings. Right. And when they have that feeling to start with, that seems like that's a tough one to overcome. Yep. What's your experience, Jerry, Michael, about how to deal with that? You're a scientist, you're an entrepreneur. How do we deal with that?
Sure. Well, I'll take a first shot at it. The basis of moving forward is information that's accurate. And the Keys are a classic case of up front, the information wasn't accurate and opinions overrode what science there may have been. This idea of the government taking over, I think the most reviled man in Monroe County sits over here, Billy Causey, who they were hanging in effigy when he was superintendent of the sanctuary when there were proposals for no-take marine reserves. But the understanding was this, is there's been a shift in the dynamic of the fisheries in Florida from historically commercially dominated to now a recreationally dominated system. And so the growth of the rec fleets have been about 700% in the last 50 years, where the commercial fleet has flatlined, in fact decreased. So that dynamic has shifted, if you will, the impact on the fisheries. And there were certain magazines that would say, well, it's not us, it's those commercial guys. It's just me and mom out fishing. Well, yeah, 45 million trips later with me and mom has a big impact. And so that information came forward, and I think enlightened folks. In fact, when we do assessments now, we see that anywhere between 80 to 95% of the total mortality rate, fishing mortality rate, is really a recreationally involved situation. So there's still a lot of resistance by the recreational industry to fish everywhere, but that has now come to the realization that they need to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So they've begun to accept the performance of reserves because they're seeing better catches. The other thing that clearly indicates to me that things are on the upswing is that now they have Billy Causey parades in the Keys, and they're basically fostered by the Florida Keys Tourism Bureau, who now uses an advertisement on TV, come diving with extra strength protection, and they show the blossoming of fishes and reefs. So it's had a major impact, I think, in the region by having the right kind of information reaching the public to recognize it's actually a thing that's working in their behalf.
I just think that it's important to, when you have those detractors from the expansion of sanctuary, for me, I've always felt, I see a decline in my field for recreational fishing. I think the commercial guys are wonderful and they should be able to take their catch, but they're going to see the benefits of the protected areas and hopefully a growth. And they're involved. They have a vocal point they have a position within the sanctuary, so their voice is heard. For me, I'm in adventure travel, and we see a big range without any take. I mean, it's all sustainable. It's very much the nature, marine life, wildlife on any of our best protected places are there because they become no-take zones. Costa Rica just enacted a countrywide ban on any type of harvesting, including hunting. So you're trying to change a culture where people are going out and literally catching food from the bush. And so they see the value of it in their tourism dollars. So I think a really strong argument is just that tourism is one of our key economic drivers. In many industries, we've seen it be, or areas, it becomes our last economic driver. You know, so it's an important decision for them to make.
Thank you both. The Sport Fishing Conservancy holds a summer-long Sanctuary Classic, and it's fishing and photo contest, essentially, across all of the marine sanctuaries. Does the responsible fishing concept here provide a model for other compatible uses in marine protected areas? And let me say, for those of you who are much younger than me, which would almost be anybody, you probably don't remember Johnny Carson, but Johnny Carson used to do something called the Great Karnak, where he would put something in his... I am imagining this comes from Tom Raftigan. That is my imagination here. But I do think that it is a wonderful model. And I'm wondering if you think there are other things that can be done which help disabuse folks of the idea that, for example, you can't fish at all if there's a marine protected area or if there's a sanctuary. So holding a sport fishing classic in those helps disabuse people of that. Are there other kinds of concepts that can help send that message that you might be aware of?
I think that Sports Fishing Classic, I've been aware of that as a member on the Sanctuary Advisory Council, and it's a good program. It really does encourage people to get their kids out. And you know, we saw from Jarvis coming down at the national park level that they're trying to increase visitation, because in the old days, Dad used to take the kids out to the park and show them how to camp. And now that is not happening, and the park is one of the national parks. It's a wonderful driver, and the sanctuaries in my area coupled closely with that. So to see this recreational fishing challenge, and it has the emphasis on safe practices, on pulling fish out and doing catch and release. So I thought that was a really healthy way to try to sustain the fishery. And it's also great. I mean, people are posting their little pictures of their kids up there. The cutest thing in the world is going to have that an emotional connection that's going to make people want to protect and support the sanctuary. Can I think of another idea? Well, I always think sea cave kayaking is a good idea, so maybe we could do one inside the cave, or I don't actually have another idea that I would think.
Well, so I'll give my response for the Keys. And so you have to really realize that the Florida Keys waters are crystalline clear. And so there's a lot of sight fishing that goes on. And that typically is a catch and release activity. So there's a recognition that that's an important kind of activity. But, you know, developing algorithms, for example, to have a weight of an animal so I don't have to drag it out of the water, I can look at it and make a couple simple measurements, are critical parts of ways we've been contributing to conservation. But, you know, this idea of the government takeover, if you've been to South Florida, you realize, you know, there's 3 national parks, a national marine sanctuary, a series of national wildlife reserves, state parks, all within the confluence. So what it's required is this incredible partnership between state and federal entities to make this thing work. And so people have accepted this idea, because what it's doing, if you've been to Miami, you know, you have that megapolis sitting right next to some of the most pristine real estate on the planet. And so my hope is with the reserve, you know, with the sanctuaries, to say that it's actually setting a buffer against development and a number of other kinds of activities that work against the sustainability of resources for the long term. The vision really has to be at the level of 5, 10, 25 years to say, what are we leaving for the future? And I think the protections that are in place are important. Because they were not, what was going on prior to this, for example, traditional fishery management controls, size limit, bag limits, et cetera, weren't working. The population keeps going up. So here's a case where you've added another arrow to the quiver. It's been an important one. I'm not here to tell you marine reserves, protected areas are the only way to go at it. I'm saying they're an important way to go at it in a multi-use, multi-dimensional strategy, that it gives us a card to play that was not available previously, and I think it's having significant impacts on the quality of the resource today. But with the kinds of rebuilding programs that are going on, we're looking at, in my opinion, a very bright future.
Thank you both. Another question, Jerry, this is directed at you, not in some hostile way, I don't think.
Okay, Fred, that's all right.
Maybe we can add some excitement to it, see if I can edgy this up a little bit. No. Understanding your expertise is in the physical sciences, how do you view the role of the social sciences in quantifying the impacts, positive and negatives, of ocean and coastal policies? Do you think the social sciences have a role in that?
You know, I think that's a critical future for all of us because this whole, we're spouting economic numbers, but really that's, you know, social appreciation, whether it's monetary or aesthetic or whatever. And I have folks call me saying that people out in Nebraska will never go to the reefs. I have folks calling me to say, I may never get there, but thank God you're there taking care of the reefs for me. And I think that's, you know, a big part of kind of this social contract that we have, that if we involve folks and if we can quantify, if you will, these abstract and quantitative feelings in a way that help to drive policy, because ultimately that's what's going to drive the policy, is having the constituents speaking up for the process. And I think it's a function of informing them, directing them, and providing the information they need to understand the problem. I think it's a critical part of moving forward.
Michael, a thought on that? The social sciences?
The social sciences? No, I don't have a comment on that.
You don't have a comment.
I would just say that social media is an important
Social
thing.
media, there we go. Good point.
I think that we're going to really see an increase in people's mindset to keep protecting these places. I think that there is not enough done to, we can all try to find other ways to continue to protect and educate and use that. So how social sciences would tie to that, I cannot say.
Thanks for the social media comment. We're all about that now at the museum, isn't that right, Jason? We're all about that. Here's a question. How do you see offshore energy production in its wide varieties? That can be oil and gas drilling, it can be wind farms, it can be a wide variety. Affecting the fisheries. Now, we've spent years on that topic. But from this perspective of the economy and the tensions that develop there, sanctuaries, marine protected areas, that and energy production.
I think there's not enough being done right now on a national level to try to move to alternate energies. We just touched on it in the last panel speaker. There was media people just talking about how when it became a trend, we would try to talk about global change and global climate change. And I think that there's some low-hanging fruit there we should really encourage, and one of those is wind farms, solar, and the coastal energy development. How it would affect the sanctuaries, I'm not sure. I know as an economic tourism driver, I certainly wouldn't tour people around the generators, but it would be an interesting topic to bring up as a a point for talking about how we can make changes to the environment and try to address global climate change. I think that if we could put a portion of the money we're seeing in all these other areas, such as the Department of Defense, we might see some significant changes in actually reducing these carbon levels, which are going to affect all of us. I mean, it's going to be a positive for all of us.
Jerry?
Yeah, a couple comments in that regard. First of all, you need to look at the sanctuaries as ports of teleconnection between far fields that you wouldn't imagine, between the active migration of adults that occupy the sanctuary areas and the transport of larvae from increased spawning biomass within the sanctuary. We're connected, and Florida is, I'm here to tell you today, is connected to Louisiana by export of both larvae and adults that migrate through the Keys this time of year and move up into the plume of the Mississippi to feed seasonally. So what it suggests is that connection is there. Energy is an important part of moving forward, but we need an information set that gives us ability to make wise decisions about choices. I'm involved in some work with nuclear energy right now where they're trying to generate power, but there's a potential impact on the regional ecology as a function of doing that. So to make those kinds of decisions, a risk analysis, we need a certain level of data. And I mean data with a scientific rigor that's planned, not I just have a pile of stuff that I collected and let me see if I can make soup out of it. Mm-hmm. And that's a very different way that we've been proceeding. It also suggests that there needs to better, in this energy pursuit, a better integration between agencies sharing information over broader spatial scales in a synthetic frame, a central synthetic frame. We don't seem to have that. You know, I have the lofty position of sitting in my ivory tower wishing that were the case. But, it really needs to be something, a mantra that we all carry forward. I think energy is an important part of this country's growth. There's no question about it. We're going to have to do it. But there's sacrifices. The BP oil spill is a classic case of it's probably what we should have been doing, but we didn't control it, nor did we follow on with the right level of scientific rigor to understand what the short and longer term effects are. there are going to be effects. It isn't over. So I think it's important to be considering what we're going to do moving forward.
Thank you. We are getting dangerously close to being out of time, so I will take the privilege of the moderator for a moment here and first of all thank Michael and Jerry so much. This is so kind of you to come here and share your wisdom, your experience with us. I want to conclude with a comment that relates to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. When Leon Panetta was our member of Congress, that is when the National Marine Sanctuary in our area was established. And Leon, to put it mildly, has deep, deep connections into the Monterey Bay area, and especially the Italian Catholic fishing community. And so Leon loves to tell the story about when his first visit back to California, after it was announced that there was going to be the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And he sat down with a number of groups, and one of the groups that absolutely insisted on meeting with him immediately were the group of generational, intergenerational, mostly older Italian fishers in the community. And what they really wanted to know more than anything from Leon at the beginning of this whole process was, they said, Leon, you're going to make this where I fish a sanctuary. They said, I'm really concerned. Does that mean I can't swear on my boat anymore? And Leon said, it's not that kind of sanctuary. And now you talk to Congressmember Sam Farr, who is Mr. Panetta's successor in interest for the last 20 years, represented us in the Monterey Bay area. He has those same conversations now with the commercial fishing fleet, such as it is in California. And those folks who have passed the Bella Marie, the little boat down from grandfather to father to son, and getting ready to hand it on to the next one. And those folks are the best storytellers about the best of the National Marine Sanctuary, about how instead of thinking maybe they couldn't swear on their boat and then their boat was going to go away and their livelihood would go away, that in fact they now have an increasingly robust fisheries which do allow them to have that lifestyle, that cultural identity, and the ability to move it on to other generations. Michael and Jerry, thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Jason Kaplan.